For 41 years, I taught teenagers how to use a table saw without losing a thumb. And the first thing I told every single class on the first day was that the most dangerous tool in the shop is the one you've stopped respecting. Not the sharpest one, not the loudest one, the one you've used so many times you don't look at it anymore. I said that sentence probably 4,000 times in my life. I believed it. I built a career on it. And then I went home and handed the most dangerous thing I owned to the person I had stopped looking at, because she had my eyes and my mother's laugh, and she called me daddy on the phone. Let me tell you something about caregiving that nobody warns you about, friend. It doesn't come at you like a fire. Fire you'd notice. Fire you'd fight. Caregiving wears you down the way a road wears a tire, evenly, quietly, from the inside, and you keep driving on it because it still looks round. You don't wake up one morning knowing you're worn through. You just notice, somewhere around the third year, that you can't remember the last time you finished a cup of coffee while it was still hot. You can't remember the last book you read. You can't remember the last time somebody asked how you were holding up and then actually stood there and waited to hear the answer. That was me. Walter Ames, 74 years old, retired shop teacher, 41 years in the Grand Rapids public schools, 12 of those as the union rep. Nobody wanted to argue with. A 1,954 brick ranch on Sycamore Bend, over in Ottawa Hills, that Ruth and I bought in 1979, with a down payment made out of summer painting jobs and a loan from her father that we paid back early because Ruth couldn't sleep owing anybody. Paid that house off in October of 2011. I remember standing in the driveway with the letter from the bank and Ruth crying into a dish towel on the porch steps, and I remember thinking, all right, that's done. Nobody can take this. 46 years married. Ruth Ames, 71. She taught piano out of our front room for 38 years. 6 students an afternoon, 4 days a week, and half of Easttown learned scales on that upright by the window. 3 years ago, she was diagnosed with Lewy body dementia, with Parkinsonism, at Corewell Health on Michigan Street, by a neurologist named Dr. Abrahamian, who has the gentlest hands I have ever seen on a man. And for those 3 years, my entire life has been her medication schedule. Carbidopa levodopa, every 4 hours, and the 4 hours does not care that it's 2 in the morning. Her good days and her bad days. The days she sits at that piano and plays Clair de Lune from memory. All of it. Every note, while she cannot tell you what year it is or what she ate an hour ago. The days she stops in a doorway and simply cannot make her feet go through it, and stands there frozen and frightened and looking at me like I'm supposed to know the trick. And I get down on the floor at 74 years old and put my foot out in front of hers so she has something to step over. Because that works sometimes. The nights she sees people in the corner of the bedroom, not scary people mostly, children. She sees children in the corner, and she asks me to give them a blanket, and I have learned not to argue with her, so I get a blanket out of the hall closet and fold it on the chair by the corner, and she settles right down. 3 years of getting a blanket for children who aren't there. That was my life. That was all of it. And here's what I did not know was happening across those same 3 years. The person I thanked God for every single night before I closed my eyes. The one everybody in my family called a saint. And I mean that word came up at cookouts, at church, at the pharmacy counter, had been quietly taking my house out from underneath me. One signature at a time. I'm going to tell you exactly how it was done, because the how is the part that matters, and the how is the part that could save somebody watching this. But before I get into it, do me one small kindness. Hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing, and it keeps stories like mine from disappearing. Give it a like, and when I'm done, tell me in the comments if you've seen something like this in your own family, because I promise you, you are not the only one. My daughter is named Denise, 46 years old, licensed real estate agent, top of her office 2 years running, the kind of woman who shows up at your door with a casserole and a label maker. She was president of the PTA at her kids' school. She ran the silent auction at church. When Ruth got diagnosed, Denise was at our kitchen table on Sycamore Bend within 36 hours with a binder. An actual 3-ring binder, tabs and everything. "Dad," she said, "you are not doing this alone. I'm not asking. I'm telling you. I want you to understand something about me. I'm not a crier. My father was a foundry man on the west side who thought crying was a thing you grew out of around age 6, and he raised me on that theory. I have buried both my parents, a brother and a student of mine who was 19 years old, and I held it together every time. I cried at that kitchen table, sat there with my hand over my eyes while my daughter rubbed my back, and I thought Ruth was right about her. Ruth always said Denise had a spine and a heart and that the two of them would find each other one day. Now stop right there with me, because this is the part I need you to hold on to. Every single thing I'm about to describe, every casserole, every ride to the neurologist, every good deed that made my life easier, I want you to keep it in one hand. And in the other hand, I want you to hold this. The first draw against my home equity line of credit was taken 11 days after Ruth's diagnosis appointment. 11 days. She didn't come to that kitchen table because her mother was sick. She came because her mother being sick meant nobody in that house would be looking at anything for a long, long time. But I didn't know that. So let me tell you what I saw instead, because what I saw was good enough to fool a man who spent 41 years catching 16-year-olds in lies. Denise came 3, sometimes 4 times a week. She drove Ruth to Cornwall for the movement disorder clinic, and she took notes in that binder, and she remembered every nurse's name, and every nurse remembered hers. She did the Meyer run on Michigan Avenue. She picked up the prescriptions at the Walgreens on Fulton. She noticed the gutters were sagging on the north side of the house and had them replaced before I'd even gotten around to worrying about it. Dr. Abrahamian told me one afternoon, in front of her, that he wished every family had a Denise. I stood there in that hallway prouder than I have been of anything I ever built. Here's what I did not see. She was reading everything she touched. Every statement, every account number, every policy, every deed. She was taking inventory of my life the way she'd walk a listing before putting it on the market. Month 5 was the worst stretch we'd had. Ruth had a run of nights where she didn't sleep at all. And when Ruth doesn't sleep, I don't sleep. 11 days on, maybe 3 hours a night. I missed the property tax deadline for the first time since Nixon. I put the milk in the cupboard and found it 2 days later. I was not thinking clearly, and everybody around me could see it, and one person around me was counting on it. Denise came over on a Thursday evening in February. Grand Rapids in February. Dark by 5:30. Ice on the porch steps. Salt tracked all over the kitchen floor. She sat down across from me at the table with a folder and a woman I'd never met. Dad, this is Priscilla. She's a mobile notary. She works with my office all the time. I asked her to come out so we could do this properly, right here, with you sitting in your own chair. I want you to notice that. I want you to underline it. She brought the notary to me. Everything was witnessed. Everything was legitimate. Nobody forged a thing that night. That's what made it work. Here's what I'm worried about, Denise said, and her voice was so calm and so rehearsed that it didn't sound rehearsed at all. You're 74. Mom's 71, and she's declining. If something happens to you, I'm not trying to scare you, Dad. I'm trying to make sure Mom's protected. Everything is in your name. The house, the pension, the checking. If you go first, all of it freezes while probate grinds. And Mom sits in this house with a disease that's eating her, with no access to anything during the worst weeks of her life. Friend, she found the exact fear, the precise one, the one I had never said out loud to another living person, not to my son, not to my pastor, not to Ruth, that I would die first and leave her stranded being cursed. This is a durable power of attorney, she said, sliding it over. Financial and medical. It just means I can handle the money side completely so you can handle Mom. That's it. That's all it does. Priscilla checked my driver's license. She watched me sign. She stamped it. She was polite and professional, and she was out the door in 20 minutes. I slept 8 hours that night. First time in months. I thought I had finally handed something heavy to somebody strong enough to carry it. What I had actually done was hand a stranger the keys to my shop, and then walk out and lock the door behind her. Now run 3 more years forward. Run them fast, because that's how they went. Medication alarms, movement clinic every 8 weeks. The blanket in the corner. Ruth playing Debussy with her whole soul on a Tuesday and not knowing my name on Wednesday. Me doing arithmetic at 4 in the morning in the dark, the way every caregiver in this country does arithmetic at 4 in the morning, trying to figure out how many years the money lasts against how many years she has, and never liking the answer. Thanksgiving. My son Danny's place. A rented duplex over off Plainfield. Danny is 41, dispatches long-haul trucks for a freight outfit, divorced, works nights half the month. Danny is the one the family had spent 2 decades quietly calling the disappointment. Denise was the saint, and Danny was the other one. I'm ashamed to tell you I let people say that in front of me. Danny's husband is named Marcus Okafor, 39. He's an anti-money laundering analyst at a credit union with offices off the East Beltline, which is the sort of job that ends a conversation at a party. 11 years Marcus had been sitting across the holiday table from me, and I could not have told you the name of his employer. Ruth was having a good day. A real one. She had on the green sweater with the wooden buttons that I have loved on her since 1994. And she was tracking conversation, laughing in the right places, telling Danny about a recital in 1988, where a boy played the entire wrong piece with total confidence. Denise was at the head of the table carving, refilling glasses before anybody asked, loud and warm and generous, telling a story about a closing that fell apart over a hot tub, with the easy laugh of a woman who has absolutely nothing sitting on her conscience. And under the tablecloth, Marcus put a folded piece of paper into my hand. It was a property tax notice. County letterhead. On the back, in ballpoint, in block letters. Your name is not the only one on the house anymore. Say you're getting the pie out of the car. Don't come back in. I looked up at him. Marcus's face had nothing on it at all. He gave me one nod. Slow. The kind that means, don't ask me anything right now. Just move. I got my phone out under the napkin, and I opened the county parcel lookup, which I had used maybe twice in my life, and I typed in my own address on Sycamore Bend. Owners of record, Walter J. Ames, Denise M. Ames Kovacs, 46 years. Every summer I painted houses, every extra shift, every car we bought used and drove till it quit. The letter from the bank in 2011, and Ruth crying into a dish towel. Somebody else's name was on my house. I stood up. I heard myself say something about the pie being in the trunk. Danny said, Dad, I'll get it. And Marcus said, No, I've got it. Stay put. In a voice so flat and so final that his own husband looked at him. And Denise, my daughter, my firstborn, the child I taught to drive in the Christ the King parking lot, smiled at me across that table with my own mother's smile and said, Grab the whipped cream too, Daddy. I walked out of my son's house into 29 degrees, with no coat on, and got into Marcus Okafor's car. He didn't drive me home. He drove me to his office. There's a thing I need you to understand about the next hour, and I'm going to say it plain. I have never in my life been more afraid than I was riding in that car. And it wasn't about money. Not 1 second of it was about money. It was about a woman in a green sweater with wooden buttons sitting at a table behind me who could not have told you what a deed was and whose entire remaining life was sitting on top of an asset that had just stopped being mine. The credit union building was empty on Thanksgiving. Our shoes made noise in that lobby you don't hear on a workday. Second floor, glass door, a desk with 3 monitors, and a photo of Danny in a canoe. Marcus closed the door. He sat down. He looked at me the way Dr. Abrahamian looked at us 3 years ago, right before he started talking. Walter, he said. He'd called me Dad for 11 years. Before I show you this, I need you to know it's been verified 3 separate times. I didn't come to you with a hunch. I came to you with a file. How long have you known? 5 months. 5 months. I sat with that. I did not get angry, and I'll tell you why, because his hands were shaking and mine weren't, and a man who's enjoying himself doesn't shake. Why in God's name did you wait 5 months? Because if I'd come to you in June with a suspicion, you'd have gone straight to Denise, because that's who you are, and she'd have counted on it. She'd have moved everything inside 48 hours, and I'd have been the in-law who accused the golden child. And Danny would have lost his sister and his father in the same week. He put his hands flat on the desk. I didn't need you to believe me. I needed a case that didn't require you to believe me. Then he opened the folder. He started with the credit line. In 2019, I had opened a home equity line of credit for $310,000 against the house for one reason. I wanted a bucket sitting there in case Ruth ever needed a level of care our savings couldn't touch. I never drew a dollar on it. Not one. I opened it and I forgot about it, the way you forget a fire extinguisher on the wall. Denise had drawn $286,000. Marcus laid the draws out across the desk in a timeline. 31 months of them. Never a big one. Between $4,000 and $9,000. At irregular intervals. Never the same week, 2 months running. Never a round number. Some of that came out as cash, he said. Kept under the reporting threshold. Spread across 3 branches. That has a name. It's called structuring, and it's a federal offense all by itself, separate from anything else on this desk. My daughter had been stealing from me with patience and discipline and careful planning. The same 3 things I had spent her whole childhood trying to teach her. She'd learned them. She'd just never found anything good to point them at. Then, the alerts. Every one of those draws triggered a notification from the bank. I never got a single one, because 8 days after that February evening with the notary, my phone number of record had been changed to hers, my paper statements had been switched to paperless, and the email on file had been changed to an address with my name in it that I had never created. I want to say that again for anybody watching who thinks their bank would call them. My bank did call. It called my daughter, then Ruth's account. Marcus slid 1 page across the desk, and I knew from the way he wouldn't look at me that this was the one. Ruth had a small account of her own. Piano money. 38 years of $10 and $15 lessons. Cash in an envelope. Deposited every other Friday at the branch on Wealthy Street. Never much. Around $51,000 at its peak. It was hers. It was the only money in 46 years of marriage that was purely and completely hers, and she used to say she was saving it for something, and she never once said what. Emptied. Every dollar. Using the medical and financial power of attorney, I signed at my own kitchen table with a notary watching. On her bad days, Ruth doesn't remember the account exists. On her good days, she never thought to check, because why would she check on her own daughter? I put both hands on that desk and looked at them for a while. Old hands. Split knuckles. From 30 years of shop class. Hands that had built 2 decks. A dollhouse. A canoe. A music stand for a woman who taught 6 children an afternoon, and had apparently not built one single thing that could hold. There's one more, Marcus said. He put the last document down slowly, the way you set down something heavy when the person across from you needs a second. A quitclaim deed, filed with the Kent County Register of Deeds in March, conveying a joint interest in the property at Sycamore Bend from Walter J. Ames to Walter J. Ames and Denise M. Ames Kovacs. My signature was on it. Walter, Marcus said. Look at the date. Look at the notary block. March 14th. Notarized by Priscilla Danforth. Sworn statement that I appeared personally before her on that date. On March 14th, I was in a chair on the 4th floor at Corwell Health, from 9 in the morning until almost 4 in the afternoon, because Ruth had fallen in the bathroom and cracked her wrist. I have the discharge paperwork. I have the parking receipt. I keep everything, because when your wife has a disease like this, you learn to keep everything. I was not in front of that notary. My signature was traced or lifted or copied off one of 100 other things I'd signed while half dead on my feet. And a licensed notary, Denise's business partner, the woman who had sat in my kitchen and been so polite, had stamped it and sworn I was standing there. And Marcus still wasn't finished. There's a reason I moved this week instead of next month, he said. For about 6 months now, she's been telling people things. He read from his own notes. To her cousin. Dad's slipping. He won't admit it. To a neighbor on Sycamore Bend. I found the stove on again. To a woman at church. He got aggressive with me last week. It's the stress. I don't blame him. And this is the one that took the air out of the room to the front desk at Dr. Abrahamian's office. In writing. In an email. As his named power of attorney. Expressing concern about her father's cognitive status. And asking about the process for a capacity evaluation. There was an appointment on the calendar. 12 days out. In my name. That I had never made. And had never been told about. An elder law attorney I talked to recognized it in about 90 seconds, Marcus said. She's building a record for a guardianship petition. If a court declares you incapacitated, she becomes your guardian and your conservator. And then every single thing on this desk stops being a crime, Walter. It becomes her job, retroactively. She wouldn't have to hide it anymore, because she'd own it. She wasn't just taking my house. She was building a room around me. One kind, worried, concerned, little sentence at a time. And by the time I noticed the walls, I would have been legally unable to say so. My phone rang. Danny. Marcus put it on speaker. Dad. His voice was doing that thing where a man holds himself flat on purpose. Mom's fine. Kids are watching the game. Denise is still here. She's been asking about you every 10 minutes. She's real concerned. A pause. Dad. Mom just told her she was a good girl. Patted her hand and said she always was, ever since she was little. Nobody said a word. The three of us just sat in it. I told her you went to lie down, Danny said. I kept my voice normal. And then I heard my son breathing hard through his nose, the way he's done since he was 8 years old when he refuses to cry in front of somebody. Here is what I thought about. Sitting in an empty credit union on Thanksgiving night. I thought about Danny. 20 years of being the other one. And he was the one on the phone holding the house together. I thought about the 11 years I'd looked past Marcus at parties. And then Marcus said, quiet, almost to himself, what do you want to do? Now, you get to a moment like that, and you've got exactly 2 roads. You can be loud. You can call her right now and say every true and terrible thing that's been climbing up your throat for the last hour. And God knows I wanted to. You can be the fire. Or you can be the other thing, the colder thing, the thing that actually helps her mother. I thought about Ruth in the green sweater. I thought about a memory care place over on Burton Street that I'd toured twice by myself and never told a soul about, and how that place was going to run 4 figures a week for as long as she lasts. I thought about what my anger would buy her. I taught shop for 41 years. First rule on the wall, hand-lettered, above the miter saw, since 1984. Measure twice. Cut once. I want everything measured, I said. Every last thing. And then we cut one time, and she doesn't hear the saw start. Marcus nodded once. He already had a list. Day 1, 8 in the morning, the Monday after Thanksgiving, in the office of an elder law attorney named Rosalind Vega on Cherry Street. Marcus had called ahead. She went through that folder the way a surgeon goes through a body. No flinching, no commentary, just finding what had to come out. By 11:15, both powers of attorney were revoked, filed, and served on every institution that held them. By 1 o'clock, the home equity line was frozen and closed to further draws. By 2, I had a credit freeze on myself at all 3 bureaus, a fraud alert on every account, and my phone number, my mailing address, and my email restored on every single statement of every single account, with paper copies mandatory. Denise lost the ability to touch $1 of mine before she finished her lunch. She had no idea. Rosalind filed an affidavit of forgery with the Register of Deeds and opened an action to quiet title, with my hospital records from March 14th attached as an exhibit. She contacted the State Licensing Bureau about Priscilla Danforth's notary commission that same afternoon. And then she did the thing that mattered most. She called Dr. Abrahamian's office herself, got the capacity evaluation canceled, and put a letter in my medical file stating that the person who had requested it no longer held any authority and was under investigation for financial exploitation. That room she was building around me, Rosalind took the walls down in a single phone call. Mr. Ames, she said, I want you to hear this from me. What she did with that power of attorney was not sophisticated. It was ordinary. This is the most common financial crime in this country that nobody prosecutes, and it is almost always a child, and it almost always looks exactly like help. Day 2, Marcus took what he'd built to his own institution's fraud unit, and from there it went to the financial crimes people at the Grand Rapids Police Department. The detective who caught it is named Marie Dunleavy. She told Marcus later that in 14 years she had never received a package from a private citizen that clean. Timeline, draws, branch surveillance dates, notary log, the county filing, the hospital records. Marcus just said thank you and went back to his desk. That's who he is. Day 3. Denise came to the house on Sycamore Bend with soup and a poinsettia. She sat with Ruth through her program. She salted the front steps without being asked. She asked me how I was feeling and said I looked tired. Little worn down, I said. Holidays. You need to let me carry more, Daddy. I looked at my daughter sitting in my living room, in the chair her grandmother used to sit in, and I thought about $286,000 and a piano account and a name on a deed. I picked up my coffee and I said, "You know what, sweetheart? I think from here on out, I'm going to start paying much closer attention to everything." She smiled. She thought that was a good sign. She had no notion at all of what was already standing around her. Day 4. Danny went to his childhood home on a Tuesday morning with his own key and a list from Rosalind, and pulled every original document out of the back bedroom file cabinet: the 2011 payoff letter, the original deed, Ruth's account records, my tax returns going back 9 years. Denise didn't know Danny could get in there. She'd never once considered that Danny would move against her, because in her whole life he never had. He told me later he didn't feel a thing while he was inside the house. He was fine. He was efficient. Then he got in his truck with the box on the passenger seat and sat in the driveway for 15 minutes before he could turn the key. I didn't ask him what those 15 minutes were like. I knew. Day 6. Rosalind started emergency Medicaid planning. She found paths I did not know existed, the way documented financial exploitation changes. What's countable? What can be recovered? What can be sheltered for a community spouse? She was frank with me. She said the money coming back would be slow and partial, and that I should not build my plans on it. But she also said that Burton Street was reachable, that Ruth's care would not depend on what a court could claw out of her daughter. That was the first full breath I'd taken in 9 days. Day 7. Denise came back and stayed almost 3 hours. She wondered aloud whether we ought to sit down with somebody about updating my advance directive. Just being responsible, Dad. Just planning ahead. I looked at her a long moment. I nearly felt sorry for her. Nearly. "You're right," I said. "I ought to plan ahead." She drove home pleased with herself. Every exit was already welded shut. She just hadn't tried one yet. Day 9. Sunday. I called her in the morning and asked her to come to dinner at the house. 6 o'clock. Bring the kids. We've got things to be grateful for. She showed up with a pie and her widest smile. Ruth was in the green sweater with the wooden buttons. She was having a good day. Warm, present, funny in that dry way that used to knock me flat in the middle of an ordinary Wednesday. She told the story about the boy and the wrong recital piece, and Danny laughed like he hadn't heard it 100 times. Laughed with 5 months of his sister sitting in his chest. Marcus sat next to him, quiet, unremarkable to anybody at that table who didn't know what he'd done, which was everybody but me and Danny. And Denise sat where she always sat, carving, refilling, generous, charming, the good daughter at Sunday dinner, like the last 31 months were something that happened to another family. 20 minutes in, there was a knock at the door. I got up. I walked across my own floor, in my own house, that I paid off in 2011, and I opened it. Detective Dunleavy and her partner. Plain clothes, paperwork in hand, calm, in no hurry whatsoever. Behind me, the talking stopped. I stepped aside, and I watched my daughter's face when she understood. "Friend, I need to tell you the truth about what was on it, because it's the part I think about most. It was not guilt. Guilt was not her first move." Her eyes went fast to me, to Danny, to Marcus, to the hallway, looking for the door. There wasn't one. We'd measured twice. Danny stood up. He'd had 9 days to write what he wanted to say, and I know he wrote it because I saw the paper on his dashboard. When it came down to it, he didn't use any of it. "Look at Mom before you go," he said. The room went dead quiet. Denise looked at her mother, and Ruth looked back at her daughter with nothing in her face but pure, whole, uncomplicated love. She didn't understand what was happening in her own dining room. She saw her girl standing up in a coat with people at the door, and she assumed what she always assumed. She lifted her hand and gave a little wave. "Drive safe, honey," she said. "There's ice out there." Danny let that sit. He let every single person at that table carry the whole weight of it. Then he said, very quietly, "She's never going to know, Denise." Her disease is going to protect you for the rest of her life. She'll go to her grave thinking you were the good one, and you will never once have to stand in front of her and watch her face change. You get to keep that. You didn't earn it, and you get to keep it anyway. He didn't stop. But I know, and Dad knows. Every dollar you pulled while he was up at 4 in the morning with her pills. Every paper you got him to sign while he could barely see straight. Every time you sat at this table and let him thank God out loud for you. I know all of it, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure the two of them are okay. Not because I owe anybody, because that's what it actually looks like when you love somebody. They walked my daughter out the front door of the house on Sycamore Bend, and Ruth watched her go and waved cheerfully from her chair, absolutely certain that her girl was just heading home early after a nice dinner, the way she always did. If you've made it this far with me, hit that like button. It's the only way stories like this one find the people who need to hear them before it's too late. Denise pled guilty. Marcus's paper trail was too clean for any attorney to fight. Embezzlement from a vulnerable adult, 2 counts of forgery and uttering, and the federal structuring on the cash draws. She got 28 months in state custody, 5 years probation, and restitution of $286,000, plus Ruth's $51,000. The quitclaim deed was voided by the court, and my name stands alone on that house today. I have the corrected copy in a fireproof box. Priscilla Danforth lost her commission and was charged separately. She is not a footnote. She's the reason the whole thing worked. If she had done the 30 seconds of her job she swore an oath to do, my daughter would have gotten a fraction of what she got. People always want to know where the money went, so here it is. About $71,000 into a home staging business that was hemorrhaging from the day she opened it. A leased Escalade, a lake lot up in Newaygo County, 3 acres, no structure, that she was going to build on someday. $40,000 into a crypto account with a man she'd been seeing that neither Danny nor I had ever heard of. And the rest, call it $110,000, just gone. Spent, dinners and clothes and airline tickets, and the 1,000 small purchases of a woman living 40% above what she actually earned and refusing to let anybody see it. The lake lot and the Escalade got sold. About $104,000 has come back so far. The restitution order runs for years, and I'm 74, so I've done that arithmetic too. Most of it isn't coming back. I've made my peace with that. Or I'm making it. Some weeks that's the best I can do. Ruth moved to Burton Street in March. There's a sunroom with a piano in it. Not a good piano, an old Baldwin somebody donated, but she found it the second day. The staff called me because they didn't know what they were hearing. She played for 40 minutes. She can't tell you what she had for breakfast, and she played Debussy for 40 minutes, and 3 aides stood in the doorway crying. I'm there every day at 11, and every day at 5. I want to say one more thing, and it's for the people who are in it right now. 6 weeks after the arrest, Rosalind Vega gave me a talking to that I needed more than any of the legal work. She said, "Walter, you spent 3 years learning your wife's medication schedule and not 1 hour learning your own." So I went to a caregiver group in a church basement on Lake Drive on a Wednesday night, and I sat in a metal folding chair with 11 other people, and I did not say one word for the first 3 meetings. Now I run the coffee. If you're doing this alone right now, find the folding chair. I'm not going to tell you it fixes anything. It doesn't. But you'll stop being the only person in the room who knows what 4 in the morning feels like. And here's the list Rosalind gave me. Write it down. Never sign anything you haven't read all the way through. And that goes double when it's your own child holding the pen. Because your child is exactly who this happens with. Make any power of attorney springing, not immediate, and require 2 people to act together on anything over a set dollar amount. Ask about a revocable trust with a corporate co-trustee. It costs money, and it is worth every dime. Keep paper statements coming to your own address forever, and if they stop, that's not the post office, that's a warning. Put a freeze on your own credit right now, today. It takes 10 minutes. Verify the phone number and email on file with every institution once a year, out loud, on the phone, with a human being. Give one other trustworthy person read-only visibility on your accounts, not authority, just eyes. And check your county's property records for your own address twice a year. It's free. It took me 4 minutes to find out I didn't own my house. Trust the people you love, and then verify. Those two things are not opposites, no matter what anybody tells you at Thanksgiving. There's a thing I've turned over a lot of nights since, and I've finally got words for it. Denise came out of me, and Ruth. She has my hands, and her mother's laugh, and I taught her to drive, and to sand with the grain, and to be somebody in a room. She was mine by blood, and blood turned out to be a thing that was just handed to us. Neither of us ever chose it. Marcus Okafor owed me nothing. Not a thing. He married my son and got a father-in-law who didn't know where he worked. And when everything that was supposed to hold gave out at once, he's the one who put his shoulder under it. Blood is what you're given. Being chosen by somebody who could have walked, that's the thing that puts a man back together. Not all the way, but enough. Measure twice, folks. Cut once. And look at the tool you stopped looking at. If this reached you, give it a like and subscribe so it can reach somebody else in time. And tell me down in the comments, has something like this happened in your family? I read every one of them. I'll see you next time.